I'm working on the seat brackets. So I built this piece and I've got it inset. It'll be welded in place ultimately, but right now it's not yet done to the point where I can weld it. But I've got this inset, and this is going to be the back of the front cab body. As you can see, there's an angle cut there because there'll be a piece that'll come up here. This is the seat frame itself. It's going to be what the aluminum square seat base sits on. And as you can see, that right there is directly above the end. And this is going to be in this position, just like that one is. I'm going to leave these long for now, but they'll ultimately be cut around here and another box built. So the idea is that I have to have this lower area here, which will extend all the way back to the end, in order for the mechanics of the movable seat to sit, because the pivot arms have to be below the level of that panel, that aluminum seat base. So that's the space that they'll sit in. They'll be here, and then they'll move up to here. So that's why I got to leave this back open. This may not look like much, but it actually took quite a bit of time to get this set, and I had to cut a piece out of here, and this will all be solidly welded, and then these gaps will be filled. So there'll be a piece of sheet steel here, piece of sheet steel here, you know, so it's nice and waterproof, and it'll be all sealed from the base up. And at some point I'll tie this in as well, and I still have to weld up a few pieces on the B pillars here, but I'm getting there. I'm trying to get this seat system set up so that I can actually take this thing for a test drive. Need to finish the brakes and do these seats, and then I'll be able to actually drive it around a little bit. So I doing a test fit to see how the seat's gonna turn out, and I think I've got it where I need it to be. So it's basically 3 inches above the base here, and 3 inches from the back. That gives me good driving position at the center, and shorter people can go forward and longer people can go back. And yeah, I think it's going to be good. So I'm probably going to not use the single piece from the front all the way to the back here. I'm probably going to make this go up to here and then go forward, and also a piece come over to the side. And I'll have to weld one onto that side, but I'm pretty happy with the seating arrangements there. The center console is going to end up being higher than I really would like it because of that hump there. I don't want to put it all the way back to here, I don't think. So I'm probably going to end up having to raise it up. I will do some tests and see how things turn out. I might end up putting it here. But yeah, if it has to be a little higher because of this hump, then it has to be. Here we go with this piece here. It's not welded in place. It did twist a bit when I was welding it together, so I'll have to straighten it out as I weld it in place, but these will be welded to the front. They'll continue past to make the back box once I have the back cab done, but this will give me the point where I can actually bolt the seats down temporarily for when I'm using it for now. They'll ultimately be connected to the swivel, so the mount will change, but that'll let me to actually finalize the seating position and start working on the dash then. Getting there. I'm gonna get this all finished and welded in place. I took some time to clean up the wiring harness and to finally finish tying together all of the accessories that require 12 volt power. That's what these 3 fuses are for. One's for the ASV, one's for the oxygen sensor heater, and the other one is for the N75 valve. I kind of tied the wiring harness up along the back of the firewall here. Kind of made it look a little bit better. I'm going to mount the N75 valve right about here somewhere. And I got a vacuum accumulator which I think will fit here, but if it won't fit there, I might put it over there. Been slowly getting this engine compartment all tied together. I've got to do my intake still. I haven't had a chance to do that. I'm going to keep the mass airflow sensor, at least for now. Just basically got to get a filter on this side and a pipe to go down to the intake there. I got my ECM box here. I've temporarily right now have the throttle pedal cut. These are the wires for the throttle pedal, because I'm going to put a bulkhead connector right about here, I think, maybe on the bottom, but probably here, that will allow me to connect all of these interior things, all these wires, to the bulkhead connector, one side of which will go to the throttle pedal. The other side will go up under the dash and finish all the dash stuff. But it closes very nicely and looks great. And now I've got my seats bolted in. Center console sitting there. It's very low. I intentionally put it very low. It's basically 2 inches off of the bottom floor. Now that is lower than the stock Jeep seats sit. Stock Jeep seats sit about here, and this one's about here, so it's about, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 inches lower. And that's because I'm tall, so I want to have as much ceiling clearance as I can get. But I'm happy with how they ended up. They move back and forth, and they have enough clearance, actually more clearance than I really need for this center console. I am a little worried about one thing, and that is this handle right there might interfere with that. There's about a 1/2 inch that it might interfere. So I may end up actually moving this seat about a 1/2 inch further in and get that space back, but it's not a big deal to do that. The other option is I think I might be able to switch to a 2011 to 2018 door card. I think they're actually a little bit narrower, but we'll see. Yeah, they turned out good. Got my center console refrigerator, which will be encased in aluminum, since I'm going to have a flat dash here, and then I'm going to have a center console piece here, and then it'll drop low enough so that it just barely goes over these shifters. And then it'll come back to here, and it'll encase this. But it finally feels good to have the cab starting to come together. Another thing I got to start thinking about is what I'm going to do for the top. I originally thought I would just build a whole new one. I think I'm contemplating using just Jeep Freedom top. So there's a company in Tampa that makes an aluminum single piece replacement top. I might just do that, and then that'll save me some time. I ended up cutting the center section out because I thought that I was originally going to have it come up higher and then come across, and it still might do that, but for right now it's not in there. I gotta figure out what to do about the top pretty soon. Today I've been doing some wiring. These wires go down along the back of the firewall and to the starter. I've anchored them really well along this firewall. We have a hot and a ground, and then we also have the starter solenoid wire that connects to the starter solenoid down there. We have that coming forward. There's going to be a fuse box here. I've also finished this piece of the main engine wiring harness, and it comes through this plug here to these 7 connectors here. which are all labeled. I know what they are now. These all have to go into this fuse box that'll be here. I have a battery disconnect switch that hasn't been wired in yet, but is my next project. And I also did a restrictor, an oil feed restrictor for the turbo. So next I'm going to go ahead and put the battery in here, and I'm going to start connecting the battery terminals and get the start of this wired in. I now have the battery installed the way I want. My wiring harness and all the power connections. These are the wires that I'm going to end up having to connect to a power distribution block and a fuse box. So we have the power from the battery disconnect switch, we have the power to the ECM, we have the starter wire, and we have wires from the ECM. On the ground side, I have a wire to the starter, a body ground, and I directly grounded the ECM, so it has a good ground. On the hot side, I only have two. One goes to the starter, the other one goes to this battery disconnect switch. Really simple. There's a little fuse here, which I haven't figured out where I'm going to mount it yet, but that's a 30 amp fuse for the ECM. That's really it. It's very simple. Here I'm going to have a battery, like a distribution block for the hots, and then I'm going to also have the fuse box here. The air box will be in the middle here. When I finally get a winch, I'm going to actually run the winch connections to these. So the reason I got the Group 34/78 battery is because I thought it'd be useful to have front lugs to run a winch to, and I can also have a couple of lugs that I could jump off of. These battery terminals here are covered, and they're pretty good terminals, so I'm happy with them. But yeah, happy with how that turned out. Here we have the Rival aluminum front bumper. And this one I just installed over the weekend. I went with this bumper, even though it's absurdly expensive, because it is made out of aluminum. So the outside skin is all aluminum. It's like a thick 5mm thick aluminum. The winch plate and the inner frame are steel, and these are steel, although I kind of wish these were cast aluminum because they're pretty heavy. In any case, this bumper was very expensive, but I'm very happy with it. I think it's the perfect looking bumper, and I'm gonna buy the matching one for the rear, although I'm gonna get the stubby version for the rear. I'll get some yellow driving lights for this. But the old bumper, which I really liked, I'll insert a picture of the old bumper on the Jeep. I liked it, but it was made out of solid steel, and it was about 150 pounds. This is somewhere in the 80-pound range or so. I don't know the exact weight, but it's definitely a lot lighter. It's not finished. I actually have to replace this vacuum hose because it actually, last time I started it, it collapsed. So this is not strong enough. But the N75 valve mounted on the firewall and a vacuum reservoir. Really all I've got to do is run a piece of vacuum hose from the brake master cylinder to the vacuum pump there, and a T to go to this reservoir. The N75 valve is plumbed in. I've got to somehow cover up, maybe using a little filter on a piece of hose or something, that atmosphere intake there, because it's open to the atmosphere and it's supposed to be, and I don't want anything to get inside the valve. But yeah, it's pretty clean. I like the you know, against the firewall mount like that, it right next to the brake booster. Works out good. Happy with that. So I bought this. This is a Spectre. There's a conical filter in there. I don't know if you can see it because of the light. This is a Spectre 4-inch housing. It's an airbox. So my original thought was that this would actually be small enough and I would be able to, you know, use it. I could potentially use it, but I have to neck this down anyway, and so I need to get the smaller version. This is the 4-inch, so it's 4 inches here and 5 inches here. I need to get the smaller one, which is 3 inches here and 4 inches here, because this is way too big. The length is the same, but with the smaller one, I think I'll be able to actually make it kind of tilted this way and go down to the turbo. Unless I can mount it here, which was my original plan, mount it here with a 90 to go down to the turbo, and then another 90 needs to be here to go down through this plate, because I'm going to buy one of those intakes that actually mounts here. At least that's my plan. There's an intake, it's made by Rugged Ridge, I think. It mounts here, and it has the intake that goes down through the fender and underneath. It would be just in the right spot to have a 90 coming through the plate and another 90 into this, but we'll figure that out later. I'm going to switch this out with a smaller one. I'll send this one back and order the smaller one and see where that actually is going to mount. Another thing I bought is power distribution block. I don't know exactly where, but it's going to be in this area somewhere. And this is where the main 12 volt higher amperage distribution is going to come from. And it's sealed, so hopefully it'll stay nice and clean. And that'll be connected to the other side of this battery disconnect switch. Forgot to mention that one of the reasons why I really don't have room for this, if this was just all I had, I probably could make some real fine lobster cuts and make it come over here and go down. The real reason is because I need to have room for the mass airflow sensor. I don't necessarily need to use this housing. There's some aftermarket 3-inch housings that I can potentially use. The real problem is you're supposed to have about 4 or 5 inches of straight, unencumbered airflow before you get to the sensor, so it gets a real true reading of the actual volume of air going past it. As you can see, I'm very tight. I just don't have the room.